My name is Evelyn Hayes. I'm 34 years old, and I'm a lead architect at one of the biggest firms in Chicago. I build things that are meant to last. The soup hit me like a slap. Hot, greasy beef broth exploded across my face, dripping from my hair, scalding my neck as it soaked the collar of my dress. It puddled on the white tablecloth. This was my mom's 53rd birthday party. My brother, Evan, slammed the empty tureen down so hard the glasses rattled. He snarled, his face red. "You've got 15 minutes to get out of this family." I looked at my parents. Nothing. Mom and Dad just stared at their plates. Frozen. But my little sister, Lila, she actually clapped. A slow, delighted clap, like it was the best show she'd seen all year. The heat in my chest wasn't from the soup. I calmly wiped the broth from my eyes. I reached into my bag, pulled out the thick legal folder, and dropped it right in the middle of the table. The thud silenced the room. "Fine," I said, my voice ice cold. 15 minutes from now, everything you own disappears. Comment where you're watching from and hit subscribe if your family ever turned on you. Stick around, because this gets so much worse. To understand the folder, you have to understand the house I grew up in. We lived in Charleston, right on the banks of the Ashley River. The house was this old, weathered wooden thing that had been creaking since the 82nds. The paint on the porch was always peeling, and the whole wraparound structure sagged under the weight of too many humid summer storms. It was a house of constant, quiet decay. Inside, Dad David worked long hours as a construction engineer. He'd come home dusty, quiet, and smelling like sawdust and exhaustion. Mom Margaret taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. She always smelled like chalk and cafeteria pizza, and her energy was spent on other people's children long before she got home. And then there was my brother, Evan. Evan came along when I was 4. He was the middle kid who instantly became the center of everything. From the start, he got the best of what little we had. When it was time for high school, Mom and Dad somehow found the money, scraping together overtime pay for his private school tuition. I went to public. Evan got new sneakers every single season, while I wore mine until the soles flapped. For his 10th birthday, a used dirt bike appeared in the yard. Mom would beam when he brought home a B-, telling her friends he was just finding his way. Dad would slap him on the back for every little league hit, even the fouls. 6 years after Evan, Lila arrived, the baby. She sealed the deal on favoritism. By the time Lila was in kindergarten, the rules had shifted entirely. Her elementary school was the fancy one across town, the kind with plaid uniforms and Latin classes. Mom drove her there every single morning, packing organic lunches with notes cut into heart shapes. I caught the public bus at 6 a.m. with a peanut butter sandwich I'd made myself. Lila's dance recitals, front row seats for the whole family, Dad holding the bulky camcorder. My state architecture competition, I got a quick nod before Dad turned back to the TV. The real divide was the assets. Money for Evan's hobbies flowed like the river outside our door. Guitar lessons, summer camps, even a part-time job at Dad's firm that was really just hanging out. When Evan turned 16, a shiny red pickup truck appeared in the driveway. Dad's bonus from a big project. When Lila turned 18, a sleek white sedan. The keys were handed over at her graduation party, complete with balloons and a cake shaped like a college diploma. I watched it all from the sidelines. I was already working, saving every single paycheck from late-night shifts drafting at a local firm, just to cover my own student loans. Did they think I didn't see it? There was one person who did. Grandpa Arthur. He lived 20 minutes away, in a modest brick ranch house. It was a different universe. His home was quiet, organized, and filled with old blueprints and leather-bound books on structural engineering. He'd built a successful property development firm back in the 72nds, designed structures that lasted, and sold the company for a decent profit. He was retired, but his mind was still sharp as a tack. He was the one I was driving 12 hours to see, long after the others stopped bothering. My family barely acknowledged Grandpa Arthur existed, unless they needed something. Dad visited maybe twice a year, always rushing, always full of excuses about work deadlines and site inspections. Mom sent birthday cards, but she always skipped the actual day, claiming she had piles of grading or a school event she just couldn't miss. Evan and Lila were worse. Evan flat out ignored Grandpa's invitations. He'd blow off Sunday dinners for hangouts with friends, sending a lazy text that he was too busy, even when Grandpa called him personally. Lila was the queen of the flake. She'd promise to stop by after cheer practice, then vanish, texting hours later with flimsy stories about study groups or sudden trips to the mall. Grandpa never complained out loud, but I saw the disappointment in his eyes. I saw the way he'd look at the phone when it didn't ring. So I made the effort. No matter how brutal my project deadlines were in Chicago, I flew or drove those 12 hours every single month. I'd show up on his doorstep, exhausted, and he'd just nod, like he was expecting me. We'd sit on his back patio, in these old wicker chairs, sipping sweet tea so strong it made your teeth ache. The air would be thick with the smell of jasmine. He'd pull out his old blueprints and quiz me. "What's the load-bearing like on this joint, Evelyn? How would you manage the cantilever?" He'd listen as I talked about my own designs, his eyes sharp. He'd nod, a slow, appraising nod that meant more to me than any award. "You've got the vision, Evelyn," he'd say quietly, tapping a blueprint. "The others, they're just passing through." Holidays put the divide under a microscope. At Thanksgiving, our house was a stage. Evan would be at the head of the table, carving the turkey like he was a king, soaking up all the praise. Lila would be snapping selfies with the pies, planning her Instagram post. And Grandpa Arthur? He'd be sitting at the far end of the table, picking at his plate, completely ignored. Dad would dominate the conversation with job site stories, and Mom would fuss over Evan and Lila, refilling their glasses before anyone else's. I'd be the one clearing dishes. I'd catch Grandpa's glance across the kitchen, and he'd just give me this tiny, tired smile. When no one was watching, he'd mouth thank you. By my late 20s, Grandpa's health started to fade. Heart issues. My visits became my escape, a refuge from the noise of my family's favoritism. He'd be weaker, but his mind was still a steel trap. He'd greet me at the door with a weak hug, his eyes lighting up. "Tell me about your projects," he'd demand, settling into his recliner. I described complex zoning challenges, high-rise designs, the pressure of sustainable engineering. He listened, really listened, asking follow-ups that showed he still tracked the entire field. "Proud of you," he'd murmur, every single time. He rarely mentioned the others. One rainy afternoon, as I was packing to head back to Chicago, Grandpa gripped my arm. His hand was frail, but his grip was tight. "Evelyn," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Family isn't always who shares your blood. It's who shows up." I nodded, thinking of all the empty chairs at his table over the years. I had no idea how those words were about to echo. 8 years into my career, the design studio in Chicago was my real home. It was my battlefield, concrete, steel, and glass. I lived on late-night renders, coffee, and the pressure of impossible deadlines. My colleagues called me relentless. I just called it survival. I was building a life they couldn't touch. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday night, under the buzzing fluorescent lights of the office. A 8-year-old tech CEO's flagship tower project his legacy was failing. A major, catastrophic design flaw was found in the foundation plans, weeks before they were set to break ground. Panic. The partners were scrambling. The client was threatening to pull the plug. I took the blueprints home, spread them across my living room floor, and cracked the entire foundation plan open. I found the flaw, a miscalculation in the core load distribution. I didn't just fix it. I led the redesign. I rerouted the core systems, redesigned the sustainable facade, and integrated a new structural support system that actually improved the building's efficiency. It was a 12-hour marathon of pure focus. The local news exploded. Young architect saves tech titan's tower. They started calling me the Skyline Whisperer. My photo was in the Tribune. I did a segment on a CNN affiliate. I was on industry podcasts. Partnership offers started flooding my inbox. Back home, Evan was chasing different headlines. He'd quit community college after one semester, declaring traditional education a scam. His new thing? A tech startup. He pitched an app called PropTrack, some property tech buzzword salad about streamlining real estate. He got a $1.6 million loan. Dad, of course, had co-signed the initial round, giving him just enough legitimacy. Evan rented a flashy co-working space downtown, hired a few developers fresh out of boot camp, and immediately bought a condo overlooking the Battery. He leased a brand new Tesla. "This is just the start," he texted the family group chat. The cracks appeared fast. The $1.6 million vanished into burn rate, which mostly meant his condo and car. Coding delays mounted. A key partner sued him for breach of contract. Then, the collapse. The condo was sold at a loss. The Tesla was repossessed. The ripple effect hit Lila, who was now 19 and in her first year of college. Her tuition checks started bouncing. Dad, having already co-signed for Evan, tapped out. Lila had to drop to part-time classes, crashing with Evan in his new, grim studio apartment to save on dorm costs. I heard she was waitressing at night, the two of them arguing over shared takeout and utility bills. Through all this, Grandpa Arthur's health declined. Congestive heart failure. The hospital stays got longer. The oxygen tanks became permanent. I coordinated his care remotely, consulting with his cardiologist between my own client meetings. Evan sent generic get-well texts. Lila posted sympathy emojis on social media. 3 years ago, the end came. Quietly, Grandpa slipped away in his sleep. I flew down immediately, handling the funeral arrangements while the others arrived late. At the service, Dad spoke briefly. Mom dabbed her eyes. Evan checked his phone through the whole thing. Lila was scrolling through her feed. After, as guests milled around the house, a lawyer I didn't recognize approached me in the parking lot. "Miss Hayes?" Arthur specified this be delivered privately. He handed me a thick, sealed envelope. Official letterhead. Confidential inheritance matter, it read. Designated solely to Evelyn Hayes. My blood ran cold. I tucked it into my bag. Back in Chicago, I opened it alone. It outlined assets, real estate holdings, trust details. Sections were still sealed, requiring in-person verification. For your eyes only. I locked it in my safe. I told no one. Weeks later, Evan called. Fishing. Hey, did Grandpa mention any? Paperwork? Anything at all? I deflected, blaming a work deadline. The secret sat in that safe, heavy as steel. The call came right after a 22-hour design marathon. I had just collapsed onto the cot in my office, my phone buzzing against the concrete floor as I was finally closing my eyes. Evan's name flashed on the screen. I sighed and answered, expecting another veiled plea for money. Instead, his voice was dripping with a honey-sweet tone I hadn't heard in years. Hey sis, big news. Mom's turning 53 next weekend. I mumbled something about a deadline. No, you have to come, he insisted. The fake cheer dialed to 11. We're having a big party at the house. Everyone's coming. We're all so proud of you, Evelyn. The famous architect. Before I could answer, I heard the click of an extension pickup. It was Lila. Yeah, Evelyn, you have to. It just wouldn't be the same without our star. Our star. The words felt sticky, wrong, but I was too tired to fight, too worn down from the 22-hour sprint. I muttered something about checking my schedule and agreed. Sleep came fitfully. Between client meetings and site visits, I slipped out onto Michigan Avenue. The Swiss watch boutique gleamed under the spotlights. I wanted to get Mom something real, something beautiful. I selected a slim, gold timepiece. It had a classic face, a dark leather strap, understated elegance. The clerk engraved it. To Mom, with love, E. It cost 2 full paychecks, but I thought, maybe this would be a fresh start. Flying last minute was too expensive, so I chose the drive. 12 hours straight down the interstate, cutting through cornfields and mountains. I packed an overnight bag and a cooler with energy drinks, my mind buzzing. I put on a podcast about sustainable design, trying to focus on material stress and carbon footprints, but my thoughts kept drifting. I hit the road at dawn, the Chicago skyline fading in my rearview mirror. Miles ticked by. The flatlands of Indiana gave way to the rolling hills of Kentucky. Halfway through Tennessee, my phone pinged. It was my best friend, Grace, a colleague from the firm. She's the only one who knows the real story. Her text read, Evelyn, weird call. Heard from a Charleston contact. Your siblings are asking around about estate lawyers. My hands tightened on the wheel. A cold dread washed over me. I texted back, "What do you mean?" Her reply came instantly. "Don't go. They're stirring money pots. Smells like a setup." I kept driving, the hum of the highway filling the silence. Another ping. "Grace, Evan's also been name-dropping your CEO tower saved to lenders. He's using your name to get credit." I pulled over at a rest stop, the engine idling. I stared at the screen. Smells like a setup. My gut screamed at me to turn the car around, to drive back to the safety of my steel and glass world. But that little voice, the one that wanted a family, it whispered, "What if she's wrong?" Gut said proceed, I thought, but eyes open. I merged back onto the highway. I arrived after dark. The house lights glowed ahead. I parked, grabbed the watch box, and slung my bag over my shoulder. The door opened before I even knocked. Evan grinned, wide and predatory, pulling me into a hug that lingered way too long. The hero returns. Lila bounced in the hallway, already snapping a selfie. Number family reunion. Mom appeared, wiping her hands on an apron. She saw the box, and her eyes widened as the gold caught the light. "Evelyn. Honey. It's beautiful." She slipped it on, her wrist transformed. Dad nodded approval from the couch. For a second, watching her smile, I let myself believe Grace was wrong. The backyard was glowing. Mom and Dad had strung up string lights, crisscrossing above a dozen folding tables draped in checkered cloths. There had to be 50 people mingling on the grass, cousins, old high school friends, Dad's work buddies, all nursing beers. The air smelled like hickory smoke from the grill, where ribs sizzled, mixing with the sharp, sweet scent of citrus from giant pitchers of lemonade. Music drifted from a Bluetooth speaker. For a moment, it almost felt normal. I grabbed a plate, loading up on coleslaw and brisket, and immediately got cornered by a neighbor. "Heard you're saving skylines up north." More questions followed. About Chicago, about my projects, about living in the city. I answered politely, forcing a smile, but my eyes were on Evan. He was performing. He circulated through the crowd with a tray of deviled eggs, laughing too loud at every joke. He slung his arm around a banker type. "Oh yeah, PropTrack is getting new life," I heard him boom. "Investors are circling again. We're talking total debt restructuring." He rattled off buzzwords he'd clearly memorized from a website: AI integration, cloud syncing, predictive analytics. People nodded, impressed. Lila wasn't far behind, holding her own court. "And I'm so excited," she gushed to a circle of girls. "I'm heading to Europe next semester. A study abroad program in Paris for fashion marketing." Someone asked how she was affording it. "Oh, I got this amazing scholarship that covered half," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Just saving up for the rest." Their excitement was a tangible thing, a bright, manic energy, and it was all a lie. An aunt I hadn't seen in years leaned in, her perfume overwhelming. "Still single, Evelyn?" she asked, her voice syrupy. "Lord, with that salary you're making, you could buy a mansion by now." A few people nearby chuckled. I felt my face tighten. Evan, overhearing, grinned. "Yeah, but she's still renting a tiny condo," he called out, making sure people heard. "Dr. Design over here, living on ramen noodles." Lila joined the pile-on. "She's like a perpetual grad student. All those awards and she's still got pizza boxes stacked in her kitchen. When's the upgrade, Ev?" More chuckles. I just forced a smile, chewing my brisket. Priorities are different, I guess. I moved toward the edge of the party, near the hedges, just needing a second of air. That's when I saw them. Evan pulled Lila aside, close. His back was to me, but his whisper carried on the breeze. "Just keep her from interfering," he hissed. Lila nodded, her eyes wide. "What if she won't?" He glanced over his shoulder, and his eyes met mine. He didn't look startled, he just looked cold. My blood turned to ice. Grace was right. It's a setup. Dinner wrapped up, Dad called for toasts. Mom beamed, her new watch sparkling. Then Evan stood up, lifting the heavy, ceramic soup tureen from the main table. He tapped a spoon against it. "Hey everyone, quiet down! Before dessert, just a quick announcement." The yard went quiet. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. We all know Grandpa Arthur passed a few years ago. Well, we finally got the paperwork sorted. He left a very generous inheritance for the whole family. He paused, looking right at me. Pharma company shares, plus a trust fund. Naomi gets nothing. Wait, Naomi? He'd used the wrong name. He'd been so focused on the script he'd prepared, he messed up my name. Silence dropped like a curtain. Forks paused midair. I met his gaze. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence. That's wrong, Evan. He never said it was for everyone, and my name is Evelyn. His face twisted, a sudden, violent flash of red. He'd been humiliated. What? You calling me a liar? He didn't wait for an answer. He tilted the tureen. Hot, greasy beef soup cascaded over my head. It wasn't just liquid. It was chunks of beef and vegetables, scalding my scalp, my face, my neck. It slid down the front of my dress, a wave of burning, humiliating pain. Gasps erupted. A few people nervously laughed, thinking it was a joke. Evan slammed the empty tureen on the table. The ceramic cracked. You have 15 minutes to leave this family, he spat, his face purple. Lila stepped forward, a perfect mask of concern on her face, her voice sickly sweet. Just accept it, Evelyn. You don't have a share. It's better this way. Silence. The hot broth dripped from my hair onto the tablecloth. My skin was stinging, burning, but underneath the pain, I felt nothing. Just a cold, sharp, structural calm. This was their plan. This was the setup Grace warned me about. This was the culmination of 30 years of being sidelined. This is what they do. I calmly wiped the beef and broth from my lashes with a napkin. I reached into my bag, pulled out the thick legal folder, and slammed it onto the center of the table. The thud silenced the murmuring. Fine, I said. My voice was ice. 15 minutes from now, everything you have vanishes. Evan's laugh was brittle. What's that? Your little design drawings? The will, I said. I opened the folder, flipped to the first tab, and turned it for him to see the notary's seal. I read aloud, my voice carrying across the silent yard. I, Arthur Hayes, bequeath my real estate holdings, valued at $3.5 million, and the contents of the trust fund, valued at $1.8 million. I paused, locking eyes with Evan. Solely to my granddaughter, Evelyn Hayes. Mom's hand flew to her chest, her new watch gleaming under the string lights. Dad just stared, blank. I continued reading. She alone continues my vision in design and construction. Explicitly excluded are those who showed indifference during my lifetime. Evan lunged, his hand grabbing for the papers. I snatched them back. Touch it, and it's tampering, I snapped. He froze. Dad finally spoke, his voice weak, pleading. Arthur. He never mentioned. He never mentioned it. I cut him off, because you visited him twice in 5 years. Cards don't count as presents, Mom. I tapped the next paragraph. And before you get any ideas about contesting, read the no contest clause. Any challenge, real or imagined, and you forfeit any claim forever. Not that you had one. Evan's fist clenched at his side. This can't stand. Our lawyers will tear this apart. You don't have lawyers, Evan. I reached back into my bag, into the folder's inner pocket, and pulled out 3 thin, stapled packets. I spread them on the table like playing cards. Packet 1. I slid it to him. This is from the IRS. Form 4564. It's an official notice of audit for PropTrack LLC. Lila, who had been silent, looked confused. They're flagging $680,000 in fraudulent marketing deductions, I explained, and $420,000 in equipment leases for assets that were never actually delivered. It notes a civil fraud penalty of 75%. Oh, and a criminal referral is pending. Your bankruptcy lawyer forwarded this to me when I inquired about liens on the estate. Packet 2. I slid the next one. The trust codicil, Clause 7B. Grandpa added this after your last skipped visit. Any challenge shall forfeit all rights and be liable for opposing legal fees. So if you sue, you get 0 and you pay my costs. Lila's lips started to tremble. And packet 3. I pushed the last, thickest one across the table. The big one. This is a debt assignment from First Coastal Bank. Remember that $1.6 million note you defaulted on? The one Dad co-signed for? I bought it. Evan just stared. He didn't understand. I bought the note, Evan. I am your creditor. The acceleration clause was triggered on default. The foreclosure timeline is active. I checked my watch. The auction is Monday. This house, the cars, everything you used as collateral, is gone by Friday. Evan let out a sound. It wasn't a word. It was a guttural scream of pure rage. He hurled his plate at the wall, where it shattered, spraying potato salad. He bolted toward me, his hands raised. I didn't even flinch. I just stepped back. Right on cue, 2 uniformed officers appeared at the backyard gate, their flashlights cutting through the dark. Welfare check. We got a call at 9:47 p.m., the sergeant said, his voice pure authority. Neighbor reported threats of violence. I nodded, the soup still dripping from my hair. That was me. I called on the drive here. I figured they'd need to be here for this part. Evan jabbed a finger, hysterical. She attacked me. She's lying. She's trying to steal our house. The sergeant looked at the soup crusting on my face and hair. He looked at Evan's perfectly clean shirt. He looked at the shattered plate. He didn't say a word. He just slowly, deliberately, unsnapped the keeper on his handcuffs. Sir, last warning. Evan froze. The party was over. 4 months later, the foreclosure notice was officially taped to Evan's door. The red stamp glared under the porch light. The auction was quick. The house, the cars, everything Dad had co-signed on, sold for pennies on the dollar to satisfy the note I held. Evan filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. It discharged most of his personal debt, but it couldn't touch the IRS lien. The criminal referral for fraud is still pending. The last I heard, he's renting a studio apartment above a 24-hour laundromat. A friend who passed through Charleston told me you can hear the rumble of the dryers through the paper-thin walls all night long. Lila's life unraveled just as fast. With no money and Dad's credit destroyed, her tuition checks bounced for the final time. Her credits were frozen, her college career over. The study abroad in Paris evaporated, replaced by the grim reality of a full-time job. She works at a downtown coffee chain now, clocking in at 5 a.m. Her dreams of European fashion marketing have faded to inventory counts and the smell of burnt espresso. A few weeks after the auction, a handwritten letter arrived at my Chicago office. It was from Mom and Dad. The envelope smelled faintly of Mom's old perfume. I recognized her looping cursive. Inside, there were pages and pages of apologies. We were blind. We didn't see. Please forgive us. We are still your family. That night, I sat in front of my fireplace. I read the letter once, then a second time, just to make sure I wasn't missing anything. I wasn't. It was all about their pain, their regret. I folded the pages, fed them to the flames, and watched them turn to black ash. I never sent a response. The inheritance was transferred seamlessly. The $3.5 million in real estate holdings and the $1.8 million from the trust. It wasn't found money. It was a responsibility. It was Grandpa Arthur's legacy. Last month, I finalized the paperwork. I used the $1.8 million to establish the Arthur Hayes Scholarship Fund. It provides full-ride scholarships for low-income students from South Carolina who want to study architecture. The first 2 recipients are from a public school right there in Charleston. Their essays echoed Grandpa's passion for building things that last. I blocked all their numbers. Evan's, Lila's, Mom's, Dad's, every aunt and cousin who stood by and watched. I changed the locks on my condo and upgraded the security system. I deleted our family group chats, our photos, every digital thread that connected me to that house on the river. I was in my office, signing the scholarship charter, when my friend Grace came in with 2 glasses of wine. She raised hers. To Grandpa Arthur, she said. I clinked her glass. And to building new foundations. Legacy secured, she said, with a smile. I saw Evan once, about a year later, when I flew down to meet the scholarship students. I was at a gas station, and he was there, pumping cheap fuel into an old, rusting beater. He was unshaven, his eyes hollow. Our eyes met across the pumps. He looked away first. On the flight home, I stopped at an airport kiosk for a coffee. The barista who took my order looked tired, her name tag shiny under the fluorescent lights. It was Lila. She didn't even look up. Her voice was a mechanical monotone. "That'll be $6.50. I paid with cash. I didn't leave a tip. I just took the coffee and boarded my flight. Last Christmas, one more card came from my parents. It was forwarded from my old address. I didn't even open it. I just wrote return to sender on the envelope and dropped it back in the mail. Because Grandpa Arthur was right. True family isn't just blood. It's not an obligation you're born into. It's respect. It's showing up. It's loyalty that's earned and returned. You don't owe your life to people who try to set it on fire. You owe it to yourself to build a new one from the ashes." Thank you for listening. Hit that subscribe button if you're ready to choose your own family.